Talk to you later.
Sorry, I should have warned you. So welcome everybody to, I think, the first ever Williston-Richmond Rotary Club lunch meeting. Charlie's trying to figure out if I'm right, but yeah, but lunch. And it's a great lunch. I'm sorry those of you on Zoom aren't here because you're missing a great meal. So first I'd like to introduce our guests. We have Jay Petrillo here, who I think is edging his way toward membership. Give him some boosts in that direction. I guess we have to say welcome back to Leslie and Armand.
Thank you.
Who aren't guests, but we've missed you. And welcome back to Barb LeWinter in person. Yay, Barb, it's so good to have you. Did I miss anybody? Let's see. It's nice to have so many people here. I can't see them all, but
Rick's back too.
oh, Rick is back. Try to catch him with his mouth full. So everybody, just before our Rotary Minute, I want to ask you all, please, I'm very bad at putting the pad out for volunteer hours at the beginning of the meeting. So before you leave, please, if you've done volunteer work this week, write it on that pad of paper on the front desk. Okay, thank you. All right, so Barb Winter is going to present our Rotary Minute. Oh, the other thing I want to say is Barb's working her way up here. We're trying to smooth out the technical stuff for the Zoom people. So Debbie, since you are the speaker chair, after Ashley speaks, if there are questions, could you call on people? And then whoever has a question should come up here, because at the microphone, the people on Zoom can actually hear us. So we'll work on that.
Excuse me. So Sally asked me to do the Rotary Minute, and I assume many of you got your Rotary magazine this month, and I kind of lifted some things from there. I wanted
in the post office.
our mail came, we'll tell you that. That's the story. In any event, I thought I would address something that Rotary Foundation is doing, especially for the new members who have no idea what Rotary Foundation is. This is the organization that every year one can contribute to give Paul Harris awards to support all the good deeds that Rotary Foundation is doing. And so I wanted to read some of the things that Rotary Foundation is doing in relation to the war. Put the hat there. Okay. Rotary really shows its strength and commitments during times of crisis. Rotary members in Poland, Hungary, and around the world have made efforts to assist the Ukrainians, including those forced to flee to neighboring countries such as Poland. The Rotary Foundation collected $15 million to support initiatives helping people affected by the war. In Poland, a Rotaract Club member, a group of Rotaract Club members set up a long-term home in a suburb for about 40 Ukrainian women and their children. They organized social events from cooking to disco parties. Club members visited them, gave them gift cards, and drove them to stores. They also provided language instruction in Polish and English and helped to find them jobs. Initially, more than 2 million Ukrainians migrated into Poland, but many have returned home now because there's been an end of some food and transportation subsidies, as well as the high energy costs and food costs that exist in Poland. But local support for the Ukrainian refugees in Poland continues. With the help of the Rotary Foundation's disaster response grants, as well as donations from local corporations, individuals, and Rotary members in Germany, Canada, Japan, Korea, and the United States, the group has opened an educational center. It's called the Ukrainian Support and Educational Center. This center provides considerable emotional and psychological support for displaced and depressed children. There are art classes for children in a room that has been decorated in blue and yellow butterflies by some children from New Hampshire. These classes help these children emotionally. Before the center opened, Rotarians invited top-tiered psychotherapists from Israel to train the Ukrainian psychologists to treat and counsel children, while Alex Ray, a Ukrainian by birth and a member of the Plymouth Rotary Club from New Hampshire, has provided more than $300,000 to the center. With the help of the local Rotary in Poland, the center hopes to expand by providing daycare, vocational and language training, and provide psychological help and medical services to the refugees. So I was just impressed at the connection with New Hampshire, that the children put together something for the for the center. And I thought maybe we can consider something as well. Anyway, that's my Rotary Minute.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara.
Welcome.
And just a reminder to you who are still eating, please bus your dishes back to the table so the caterer can clean them up and go home. So Debbie is going to give us our inspiration.
Yes, hi, everybody. So I wanted to share with you a poem from one of my favorite poets, the Irish poet John O'Donoghue. Some of you may be familiar with him. He passed away about 15 years ago, but he was particularly well known for popularizing Celtic spirituality, which is a kind of school of thought around Christian theology. And so this particular poem is simply called A Blessing, and he wrote it for his mother. On the day when the weight deadens on your shoulders and you stumble, may the clay dance to balance you. And when your eyes freeze behind the gray window and the ghost of loss gets into you, may a flock of colors, indigo, red, green, and azure blue, come to awaken in you a meadow of delight. When the canvas frays in the crook of thought and a stain of ocean blackens beneath you, may there come across the waters a path of yellow moonlight to bring you safely home. May the nourishment of the earth be yours. May the clarity of light be yours. May the fluency of the ocean be yours. May the protection of the ancestors be yours. And so may a slow wind work these words of love around you, an invisible cloak to mind your life.
Thank you. The Irish are great at blessings. But that may be in part because of the history of the struggle that the Irish people have had to contend with. So I have a few business notes before we get to our speaker. First, so this is my confession day, apparently. I was remiss when we inducted Jen. I didn't introduce her as a financial advisor at Edward Jones. So now everybody knows that Jen is an advisor. No, she didn't. And so I would like, in that same light, I would like to ask Aaron and Jen Kennedy to come up here. So we have two more new members of the club. Aaron Pond is the bank manager at Community Bank here in Williston over at Cottonwood. And Jen Kennedy is a retired lobbyist. I'm not sure she's completely retired, but let's assume she's retired as a lobbyist. So they both have wonderful connections that probably go in different directions. So that's lovely. Please welcome, and of course you get your fashion statement. There should be a pin in there. You may still have one because Jen has been a Rotarian in the past. Please let's welcome Aaron and Jen to the club. Thank you. Thank you. You're welcome. That's right, Aaron, you were a Rotarian in Waterbury.
Yes.
Yeah, so we've got some experienced Rotarians here.
You should have sang there.
Okay.
They also had pie there.
Oh, boy. Okay, we've got some things to live up to.
Yeah, it's okay.
The next thing is March 4th is our next blood drive. and I have posters. So please raise your hand if you would like some posters to post, maybe in the town offices. I'm gonna put them at my gym and in the food shelf. And of course, I'm asking you all to get online and sign up at the same time. Actually, maybe what I'll do, I'll just pass this along. So if you need a poster, take one or two and pass them on. March 4th, it's a Saturday from 10 to 3.
Sally,
Yes,
Leslie on the screen.
hi,
How many posters did we get?
I don't know.
Okay, because I would like some, and I know the last time we didn't have very many.
It seemed like maybe there were 10 there, but I'm not sure. How many would you like?
I'd probably like 8.
Oh, 8? Okay, well, so,
You want me to ask them for more, or do you want me to just take a couple? It doesn't matter.
I think you should make copies of one. You can
Okay.
make copies in color
Okay.
and put them where you want. Okay. I have an email to read you from Bonnie Lord. You will remember Bonnie came and spoke to us. She's the youth librarian, and we voted to give them some money for kits. She says, "Hi, Rotary Club members. I'm emailing to say thank you so much for sponsoring our physics solar STEM kit and solar bug program at the library. The kit has been checked out already, and the solar bug event last night was a hit. We chatted about where we see solar panels, where solar energy comes from, and even how circuits work. The attendees gave me the permission to share their photo with you, and I'll pass it around. And we all said thank you to the Rotary Club. It was a lot of fun, and everyone went away with a solar powered bug that should crawl around at home in the sunlight. Hopefully they don't fit in the vacuum cleaner. Thank you again. We greatly appreciate that you made this program and kit possible." So I'll start this over here at the front table. There's a picture of the students. But so thank you all for having voted those programs in. And I think that's, one announcement. Marty wanted me to mention that he's going to call a meeting of the 5K group, possibly after one of these lunch meetings. Sherry, me, Andy, Debbie, and Martin and Dave are, yeah, are leaders, sort of. Everybody in the club participates, but these are the people who sort of oversee the parts. Having said that, if anybody else wants to join in this meeting, email me or email Marty. Marty's going to send out an email and see when is most convenient for us to meet. Yeah, there's plenty to do. So anyway, let us know if you want to be integral. Should I say that for the benefit of the Zoomers? Okay, Debbie, you're on. Already.
Great. So I'm very happy to welcome today our speaker, Ashley Couture. Ashley is a speech language pathologist and owner of True Voice Speech Pathology Services. Until quite recently, she worked as both a speech language pathologist and research educator at University of Vermont Medical Center, where she worked for 24 years. And she doesn't seem old enough to have possibly done that, but she has a degree in psychology from McGill University and a master's in communication science and disorders from UVM. Ashley specializes in rehabilitation from brain injury, augmentative alternative communication / assistive technology, and voice therapy. In her practice, Ashley works to help each individual client find their true voice and remove barriers to their participation in life that may be created by differences in communication. Ashley participates in statewide teaching and advocacy efforts that promote access for diverse populations and facilitate evidence-based practice for the betterment of her husband and 2 boys. And when she isn't wearing her speech language pathology hat, she enjoys skiing, running, reading, and time with family and friends. I count myself among those. We hang out sometimes. So please help me welcome Ashley Couture.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Debbie, and thanks everybody to having me come and speak today. I'm so sorry that I can't be there in person. Can I just get a thumbs up that the sound's coming through okay? We all good? Great. Awesome. So sorry that I couldn't be there in person, but very excited to share a little bit with you about the field of speech pathology, which clearly, as I've done it for 24 years, I have to like something about it. So I'm excited to share with you. So I'm going to attempt to share a few slides here. And I also am hopeful that I will stay on track and have some time at the end for questions and conversation. Can I get one more thumbs up that the screen is coming through? Okay, great, awesome. So I wanted to start with just giving you a little bit of background. Not a lot of folks know exactly what a speech language pathologist is. It's got this long name, funky pathologist name at the end of it. But in general, speech language pathologists, who are also known as SLPs for short, and it's not sleep, even though a lot of the people we work with want it to be sleep, but it is not. We work to prevent, assess, diagnose, and treat speech, language, social communication, cognitive communication, and swallowing disorders in children and adults. And if that sounds like a whole heck of a lot and a lot of confusing stuff, it actually is pretty big. And I'm going to go into each of those areas in a little bit more detail. But one of the short ways we like to describe kind of what speech pathologists do is that we're really specialists in terms of body mechanisms and workings from the neck up. So starting with kind of throat and swallowing, and then the mouth for eating and speaking, and then also a lot to do with brain function and how we use that for communicating and for swallowing. Just in terms of my personal journey and how I came to be a speech language pathologist, after doing psychology at McGill, I thought I was on a path to go to graduate school and become a psychologist and work in the mental health field. And also really loved research and went to work in a research lab at a Boston VA hospital. And at that VA hospital, ended up being introduced to the field of speech language pathology and got to observe some therapists working with veterans who had had strokes and had significant loss of speaking and language, and watched these therapists help them develop their speech again, and then also alternative ways of communicating. And I was completely hooked. It was a way of helping people that really spoke to me. And I knew that I was in for helping people because from a very young age, I had been engaged in helping activities. We had a middle school project where we were asked to visit a resident of a nursing home once a week and keep a journal. And I continued going to the nursing home and visiting folks there for many, many months after the assignment was over. So I kind of knew early on that I was going to get into this helping field. And then when I put that together with my interest in the brain and speaking and communication, this was a natural fit for me. So how exactly do we help? What are these different areas of disorder and function that speech pathologists work with? So it can be a difficulty with the actual mechanism of speaking, so forming the sounds to form words. And that can be either something that's acquired through an injury, or it can be developmental, as in children. Language disorder has more to do with how we use words. So how we find the words, put words together into sentences to express a thought, or how we understand words. And that covers also reading and writing of words. Now, cognitive communication disorders is where our thinking skills come together with communication. So there's a lot of thinking skills, including memory and concentration and problem solving and organizing our thoughts, that are kind of underlying our day-to-day communication. And so speech pathologists also help folks work on those thinking skills, especially, and how disruptions in those thinking skills might impact somebody's ability to communicate clearly and well in their daily lives. And then swallowing disorders are, because we are kind of trained and experts in the muscles and the mechanisms of the mouth and the throat, because they have to do with voice and communication. We also are experts in the muscles and the processes involved in swallowing. As those of you finish your last few bites of lunch, you'll start thinking hard about your swallowing. And it can go very wrong when somebody is ill or has a stroke or a brain injury, and it can cause some significant secondary complications in that either it becomes so hard to eat that people can't get the nutrition they need, or it actually goes down the wrong pipe and goes into the lungs and can cause some secondary illness like pneumonia. So swallowing disorders has become something that speech pathologists are also specialists in. So who are the people that we work with? I've alluded to this a little bit, but we really work the entire age span from birth to death, literally. So we work with children who have a developmental speech or language disorder. We work with people who may be born with developmental disabilities, so someone with cerebral palsy or Down syndrome or autism, for whom that diagnosis impacts their ability to speak or communicate. So we work with those folks. And this is that long technical term that I tripped up Debbie with, which is for some of these folks, it includes using devices or tools that might be alternative ways for them to express themselves. So if their natural speech or communication does not allow them to really get their thoughts across, we can offer them iPad technology or specialized computer device technology that allows them to either type or use pictures, but it's an alternative way of getting their message across. And we call that augmentative alternative communication. We work with adults and children who may have had acute brain injury. So that could be a stroke or a traumatic brain injury due to an accident. We work with adults with degenerative and kind of progressive illnesses. So folks with multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, and Lou Gehrig's disease. And like I said, it's a huge range of ages. So I thought I'd just give you some context or some statistics, but it's estimated that about 5 to 10% of the US population has some sort of communication disorder. And that's kind of the umbrella term over all of those different specific areas that I talked about. And it costs us a large amount of money as a country annually to care for and to rehabilitate and to work with these folks with communication disorders. And another way to look at it is there's estimated to be 42 million people in the US who have some sort of communication impairment, or 1 in 10 families. And I found myself kind of thinking about this statistic in the light of the recent pandemic. One of the areas that speech pathologists have become very active in helping with is people who are experiencing long COVID and the brain fog symptoms of long COVID that really alter people's ability to think clearly and remember and concentrate. And I'm wondering how this statistic will change now that we know that there is a large percentage of folks who have had COVID who are experiencing some symptoms of long COVID and some thinking and communicating difficulty. So it's definitely in process of changing. So in terms of how we are professionally affiliated, we are speech language pathologists have a national organization. the American Speech, Language and Hearing Association, or ASHA for short. It's a very large organization and it is our certifying body. So after completing a required master's degree in communication sciences and disorders, you take a standardized national exam and have a certain number of supervised clinical hours that you do as a speech pathologist before becoming certified as a speech pathologist. And then there are annual requirements for professional development and continued learning that are required in order to maintain your certification. And ASHA has a vision and a mission towards making communication accessible and allowing everyone to fulfill their human right to be able to communicate as best as possible. And they also, as part of their mission, are quite active politically because speech pathologists work in both systems of education and healthcare, where there is a fair amount of need to advocate for our services and for the people that we serve. And so we've got quite an active lobbying body in Washington. So that's part of what ASHA does on our behalf as speech pathologists. They also are a resource for advocacy and for continual learning, as well as what we would say is evidence-based practice. So promoting the dissemination of research about what are the most effective practices in speech pathology for us. So they're a resource in that way as well. And then states have their own associations that are connected to the larger national organization. So we have a Vermont Speech, Language and Hearing Association that serves as a professional resource as well as a networking opportunity in the state and helps liaison with our national connections with ASHA in Washington. So where do speech pathologists work? And it's about as wide a breadth as the populations we serve and the types of disorders that we treat. And so often the setting that people are most familiar with is in the school system, working with young kids who are having difficulty developing their speech or language. And they work with special educators and teachers in order to support children's learning. So if children are having disorders that are preventing them from accessing their learning, that's where speech pathologists are active in school settings. That goes all the way from early intervention all the way through high school. And then the setting that I, of course, am most familiar with is the hospital setting. And those are often two very different tracks. So speech pathologists, after their training, often make a decision about which track they're going to pursue, whether it's kind of an education school-based track or whether it's more of a medical and hospital-based track. And speech pathologists are present in all parts of the medical system. So we work with folks who are in the acute care, needing hospitalization for an illness. And the speech pathologists in that setting do a lot of work with swallowing in order to prevent secondary illness due to difficulty with swallowing and ensure that people are able to get the adequate nutrition they need to recover. We also work in an acute intensive inpatient rehab, which in Vermont is at Fanny Allen in Colchester. And this is a short-term intensive rehabilitation program for folks who have had either orthopedic injuries or traumatic brain injury or stroke. And it's a daily intensive part of a rehab therapy team, along with physical therapists and occupational therapists that speech pathologists will be a part of. Speech pathologists are also part of the staff at a nursing home, working to establish safe swallowing and good communication for folks who may be living there with dementia, or also people who go to a nursing home for a short period of rehabilitation and then go home. So we're part of the rehab team there. We also are members of home health agency teams, seeing people in their homes who may need therapy or medical services. And then I am now becoming more familiar with serving folks in community settings. Speech pathologists, many speech pathologists are in private practice and work with folks in their communities or in an office in a community, and work with folks, again, on those wide range of disorders, but in their natural community context. So either in their home or their place of work or other places that they engage in the community. And then speech pathologists are also actively involved in consultation and training. So we will educate and work with teams of people who are supporting an individual with a communication disorder. That could be an agency in the community who's working with somebody with a developmental disability. So a place like Howard, where we might work with a team on helping them use alternative ways of communicating, or it could be educating a hospital team on how best to communicate with somebody after stroke, or part of an educational team working with teachers on how to best support a student in the classroom. So I think what really brings this profession home is the stories of the people that we work with. And it's a pretty humbling profession, and often I feel very honored to get to help people during what is often a very trying and kind of vulnerable time, when you have either developmental difficulties learning to communicate in our most typical way, or you have an injury that takes away your ability to communicate. It often puts a client and a family in a very vulnerable position. And so you're doing a lot of supportive counseling as part of the rehab process, as part of the rehabilitation process. And being with folks in that time is a pretty I feel it's a very honoring thing to do, to be with them, and that they let themselves be seen with you in that way in order to work hard, in order to recover or establish communication. So it's a pretty amazing job. So there's lots of people that I feel connected to through my work. And then there's a handful of people that really grab your heart and stay in your heart forever once you've met them. So I thought I'd share a couple of those stories with you. One of them is, I met a young girl when she was 7 and she had leukemia, and that had been undiagnosed, but when they diagnosed her leukemia and treated her with chemotherapy, it actually caused some clotting in her bloodstream, and she actually had then a pretty significant stroke. And she had the stroke in the left side of her brain, which is the side of our brains that's most specialized for talking and for language. And so at age 7, she really lost all of the language that she had learned. And we really had to begin a pretty painstaking process of rehabilitating and relearning and helping her brain learn to make the sounds again and pull the words out again and be able to talk. One of the amazing things about the childhood brain, though, is that it is very able to learn quickly. And so most children who have, luckily it's rare, but most children who have those kinds of injuries are able with rehab to kind of regain a lot of what they've lost. So she has learned to use her left hand to do most of what she needs to do, and she's learned to walk again. And she's also now a fully social and very talkative and opinionated teenager with lots of great relationships. And that has been, I've known her since she was 7 all the way to about age 15. And her family has just moved to Denmark, and her goal is to live in to live there for 10 years so she can visit any European country without having to have different passports. And that's her goal. So she has goals and dreams, and a very exciting process to be a part of. And then another example is a gentleman who in his 40s had a stroke for unknown reason. It's not really clear why he had his stroke, but prior to his stroke, he had been a builder, a carpenter, and a designer. So he was very skilled with numbers and with visual spatial things. So we all have 2 hemispheres in our brain, and the left side of most people's brains is specialized for language and communication. And the right side is much more visual, spatial, and involved in other parts of communication other than the kind of nuts and bolts of talking and listening. And he was very skilled in this visual, spatial, numbers, mathematics part of his right hemisphere. And so even though his ability to use words was dramatically impacted, he was really able to use his right hemisphere to get back to carpentry and designing and using AutoCAD online to be able to really to use his strengths. And so He also has been quite a journey, but it's a good example of I went and worked and consulted and trained with his work colleagues to help them understand this communication disorder, which we would call aphasia, post-stroke, and help them understand how they could set up meetings and set up processes that would really allow him to work with his strengths. And so a good example of how to work with a supportive team on how to support somebody getting back to their meaningful roles and meaningful work. Excuse me. And then the last group of folks I think I'll share about, excuse me, is a group that I really enjoy working with a lot, is people with Parkinson's disease. And people with Parkinson's affects the part of the brain that gives our brain information about how to initiate movement and how to do movement in a kind of typical way. So people with Parkinson's, as their illness progresses, often have a kind of clamping down of movement, meaning their pattern of walking becomes a little shortened, and it becomes a little bit more like shuffling, and their voice can lose some of its volume and it can become quiet and very hard for them to be heard clearly. And there has been a lot of research about voice and speech therapy programs that really help people with Parkinson's bring forth a louder voice and a more clear voice and maintain the speaking volume and the speaking clarity that they need throughout the later parts of their illness. And so we work very intensively on using intention and effort to bring forth a louder voice that allows people to be heard and keep participating in some of the social communication contexts that are important to them. So the group of folks with Parkinson's is a particularly, it's rewarding because there's very well-established programs, and they are often programs that empower people and help them feel good about what they can do and able to participate again. So those are just some examples of some stories that I think kind of hit home. I'll leave you with a kind of just a quote that I think is very true and is what really makes this job meaningful to me. But communication really is an essential part of human life. And I remember entering school for my master's degree in speech pathology and not really understanding the swallowing part that went along with this communication part. Like, swallowing was not something I was that interested in. Felt like focusing on people's eating and changing what they eat was really not what I was about. I was really about people who had lost their ability to communicate and how essential that was. And one of my mentors and teachers said, well, think about both communication and eating as such a core component of who we are as humans. I mean, social eating, cooking, cultural pieces of food and eating is also a pretty essential part of what makes us human and how we experience life as humans. And so having found a profession that allows me to help people with both of those essential human functions feels pretty awesome and amazing. So I feel blessed. So this is my new information about my new business. Debbie has some additional information out there. This is a new realm for me to not be a hospital representative, but be kind of out in the community. I am happy to take any sorts of questions or comments or wonderings about the field or my work at the hospital or in private practice. I would love to hear. Thank you so much.
Hey. Thank you. Thank you, Ashley. All righty, we have a question from Pastor Paul. Thank you so much, Ashley. That was awesome.
Sure.
He's coming up to speak in the microphone.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. And I wanted to offer a big thank you to your entire field of endeavor. My sister is a speech pathologist. She's down in Texas. And I think that one reason she chose that field of endeavor is that she saw her younger brother undergo speech therapy when I was young. In fact, I lived in a small town in Oklahoma, And so once a week, my mother would pick me up at school and take me out of school to drive half an hour or more to a university where a speech professional dealt with me and worked with me, and had a positive impact on my speaking. That was pretty crucial because my current occupation is a pastor.
Yes.
Public speaking is at the heart of what I do. And so I'm immensely grateful for the impact of those speech professionals and the impact they've had on my life. And clearly they had an impact on my sister's life as well, because she is now a speech pathologist. Also.
That's amazing.
So thank you for what you do. It is just so important.
Oh, thank you, Pastor Paul. What a testament to the work that you did as a youngster to overcome those difficulties, that you're now able to public speak in such a profound way. So thank you for what you do also.
Yeah, that's neat. I actually have a question. While other people are maybe thinking about some, I know on your website you mentioned that some of the work that you do is to help people who are transitioning on their gender to have appropriate speech for for their new new beings, I guess. So could you say a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Debbie. So as I mentioned, voice is one part of speaking that is within our area of expertise. And people who are transgender and transitioning with their gender often have a mismatch in the sound of their voice and in the manner of their communication with who they believe their true gender to be. So they have a gender that was assigned at birth, and they grew up within the cultural norms of that gender assigned at birth, but that's not who their true identity is. And so they have a mismatch with their voice, the sound of their voice, and their manner of communication. And so speech pathologists work with those trans individuals to work on the pitch and the sound of the voice, to bring it more in congruence and alignment with their gender identity, as well as all of these other aspects of communication that we typically associate as kind of male or female. So I'm demonstrating one for you, which is gestures. Feminine communication tends to have a lot of gestures, but there's a lot of things we can think about that tend to be more on the kind of male side of communication and more on the side of female. And so speech pathologists help trans folks work on voice and communication to have a more congruent sense of their gender identity and with their outward presentation.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions from anybody? Well, I think everybody probably agrees with me that it was informative, but also so nice to hear your personal take on your profession and how rewarding it is, and what a great service you do for other folks. So thank you so much, Ashley.
You are so welcome.
And to give you proper thanks, we also make a donation in your name to the Williston Central Mentoring Program.
Oh, wonderful.
So, yep, really
Thank
appreciate
you.
being here.
Thank you so very much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Ashley.
Take care.
And I have to say, it's probably just because of your career, but you speak so clearly.
Yes.
If you would allow me to share one other funny story that, because people ask me all the time, how did you get into speech pathology? And interestingly, I actually am deaf in one ear. So it's kind of funny. I wear both of these headphones, but I actually don't need this one because I can't hear. Anyway, I'm deaf in my right ear, and I've been deaf in my right ear since age 3. And I think that has to do somewhat with the way that I developed my articulation, that I developed a very distinct articulation, and but I never considered my deafness in one side any sort of disability at all. And I got to my graduate program and went to a hearing, I learned about audiology, and they did a whole unit on one-sided deafness. And that was the first time I had ever really thought about the fact that my deafness was any kind of a impairment or a disability. But I really, it's interesting, but I think it relates to how I developed my articulation, because I think it just changed how I was hearing myself. And so that's the best explanation I got. but thank you.
Well, I'm going to be careful how I speak now because everything you said is so clear. It's kind of stunning, but thank you. That
Thank
was
you.
wonderful.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Anybody in the immediate vicinity did not buy a raffle ticket. Ooh, Wall bought raffle tickets? Charlie. Hey, Charlie, you get to pick one and announce the.
One, 7, 0.
Okay, who's got 170? Huh,
Last 3 numbers?
yes.
Oh, cool.
All right, Jay. Now, we should have mentioned that he bought 9 tickets. So we're gonna ask our sergeant at arms to do his thing. And we're gonna see if we can put the microphone on each table so the people at home can hear. It's got a long cord, but whether we can do